Oh my gosh. So again, let me reattempt re-recording part 2, which really just speaks to some of the challenges that are still there in the workplace. Racial discrimination, disparities in pay, based on gender, based on race, toxic work environments that impact our mental well-being, corruption that doesn't only impact just the company and the people involved, but also further perpetuates poverty within our society. Its impact, its consequences on our mental health states and well-being. Racial discrimination, I've already mentioned that. Not to mention, what is this? Sexual harassment, right? I mentioned the issue of policies, but I won't go too deep on that and the failure of implementation. I'd want to engage that with somebody more well-versed, but the realities still in this day and age that are there that have a greater impact than just the impact on the company and the person between the chair and the desk at the time they are there. But this impacts them when they get out of there as well. It impacts their perception of themselves, their abilities, their competence, confidence in the work they produce. It impacts culture and even the lack and absence of culture in work environments. It's quite dangerous and toxic, actually, especially where we still have to come together to work as teams. Where is the synergy? How are we going to achieve that if we are still dealing with some of these disparities and challenges in the workplace? Because you see, when it comes down to the actual consequences of these things and their impact, they go so far as shaping your reasoning. And of course, we've got a mind that is made up of knowledge, thought, memory, those pictures. And when we're talking about neuroplasticity of the brain's ability to change itself, and when we talk about using that, right, which is your core capital power, superpower, as far as your brain is concerned, the ability to change your thinking, reasoning, and otherwise in improving yourself as far as mentally rewiring, cleaning up a clogged mind, reorganizing so that you can effectively better collaborate your thinking so that you can still come back and show up resilient in a toxic work environment where you can still thrive, irrespective of the fact that the environment only allows for survival, right? Which is the greater reality of any South African in this day and age economy and many of our work environments. I do pray and hope as we go out as women and Black people who build our own businesses and industry, we take into cognizance that as important as that bottom line is in driving a business and the lifeline of a business, but the thriving of the business, its ability to impact and actually build a sustainable, well worth building, valuable legacy, it has to consider its people and ensuring that the environment is enabling for people to also grow and even thrive, to jump outside and leave, not because the environment is toxic, but because they've been developed by this environment and realize their potential and now they can fly. Then there's space for somebody else there. Because there will always be, look at the rate of our unemployment in this country of trained and non-trained, skilled and unskilled, unemployed people and youth. It's a far cry to something worth celebrating other than a contextual history that was achieved that we're very proud of and happy to celebrate. But when we continue this legacy and call for the necessity of rethinking, reshaping, redetermining our legacy within the preservation of these public holidays and such, a major one of Workers' Day. I mentioned corruption, I mentioned gender, pay and disparities and race and toxicity in the work environment. There are many, we can think of many. Many have chosen to jump ship and follow their passions and dreams. Those who lost that luxury have chosen to start over and go home because to prioritize their mental health. Happy Workers' Day. Thank you for those that came before. To the ones that now continue to carry the baton. Let us, before we can run with it, before we can pass it to the next generation, reopen it. Let's rebuild it. Let's reconstruct it. Why not? Every generation has its own call and challenge. And if we consider that right next to the UK or Britain, South Africa has the lowest world mental health quotient. We just happen to be a resilient people, more independent people. And that's just the reality that has also been informed and held within the legacy of our history. Do you see how an environment, how identity can shape how you show up in the world? A third world country. I can think of many things that I can't say on this video in how we fare up intellectually and otherwise and innovatively with some world countries. And if you look at both the negative sides of our history, if we look at the colonization, the apartheid, the effects and what was implemented within those systems to achieve what it wanted to and needed to for itself at the time, what we achieved as a people to come to be a people that has a democratic political dispensation that we can celebrate, fight for, holidays we can remember and preserve, and what they signify. We have to take that in cognizance. And then we have to take into cognizance the immediate environments, right? And the person within those that is navigating those realities. I won't dwell much into it, but this is all about food for thought, because as an avant-garde mental health, when we talk about holistic mental health, we talk about immediate holistic mental health. What you consume, what you expose to internally and externally, everything going on into that structure of that mind and that person, right? There's just so much to it, but all of it is interrelated and it impacts you. And when you have to rethink how you're going to go back and navigate and negotiate within those relationships, in those environments, as it affords you, as far as you can, to do so, what do you go back and recalibrate within yourself so that you can actually thrive, though the environment might not be enabling of you to thrive? It calls for survival. How do you move yourself away? At which point do you do that? How do you deal with the fact that it requires time before you can do that? Or what are you having to consider in facilitating your mental well-being so that you're able to still show up at your optimal, so that you can still give back to yourself the best of you and your relationships and the reality that you are cultivating outside of that workspace. Happy Workers' Day, everyone. It's Love and Light from me, Ukwali Mutumlanjana, and where we do expand on these topics as we go on through the threads over time when we talk about mental health and different subjects and their impacts and how we go about collaborating with ourselves and how we show up in those spaces, how they affect us and our health and our well-being as we try to foster an empowered, thriving mental health state despite the ebbs and flows of life and our realities. It's Love and Light from Ukwali Mutumlanjana. Have a great one.